Father, we thank you for your great love towards us. We thank you that you're always there, and we pray that we may understand that all heaven is astir. All the angels are interested in our salvation. They're busy all the time. Help us, Lord, to be as interested in our own salvation. May it be on our hearts always. We thank you that you've called us. We thank you that we've seen the light. And we pray that we may continue to grow. May we understand your plan for us, that we may help someone else. Bless us now today. Guide us and protect us in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Last week we talked about the red heifer and the two sparrows. So I hope you have those in your mind. Get into the Bible and study those things carefully, because there are details we didn't cover. That's going to be the case every time we're together. I'm hitting highlights. I'm hitting places you might not look at right away. So get in and study. Find sources to look at. This time we're going to look at the two goats. Now, we probably have studied that, and we have looked at it, and so we have an idea what it means, but there are some things in there maybe we can look at today. Let's back up to a very familiar place, John, the 3rd chapter, where we see Nicodemus coming in the night to find out who Jesus is and what he's all about. Now, Nicodemus, for some strange reason, people who preach about Nicodemus in that 3rd chapter try to make Nicodemus look foolish. And I have thought about that. I said, why would anybody want to make Nicodemus look foolish? I mean, there is Nicodemus in that chapter, and then there's Nicodemus later. You see him when Jesus has died. And you see Nicodemus at the cross crying and pulling his body down tenderly and gently, and taking care of the dead body of Christ. And so that's the same Nicodemus that was over here, except that over here he's a Christian. Okay? But that's Nicodemus. Now, when Nicodemus came to Jesus, he was known everywhere in Israel, Jerusalem, as the teacher. Jesus calls him that when he's talking to him. Are you the teacher? It doesn't come out like that in the King James. It says there, a teacher. But in the Greek, it says the. Are you the teacher? Now, what do you suppose it would take to become the teacher? Can you imagine yourself filling that spot? This is who Nicodemus was. Fantastic. He was a brilliant person. He didn't do a lot of strange things. The people listened to him with respect. They paid attention. This was the teacher. And so when we see him come to Jesus, that's the man. He's highly respected, and he's really quite an individual. And the very fact that he came says something about him. How many of the other ones came? So he's the only one that had the gumption to get over there and take a chance, because it was taking a chance. Somebody see it and they said, what are you doing? But he got over there and he was in front of Jesus. And what do you think he saw when he saw Jesus? Well, he saw something he'd never seen before. He was not expecting this. So he came over there because he'd heard things. But when he got in front of him, this eloquent teacher all of a sudden couldn't talk. I rather imagine he stuttered when he said, Rabboni. Because when he saw Jesus, he wasn't sure what he should call him. Rab, Rabbi, or Rabboni. There are three terms that are respectful. You talk to a teacher, and so you got confused, I'm sure, looking at Jesus, and so he picked the middle one. That's safe. That's highly respectful. It's better than the low one, but it's not quite the high one because you don't know what you're dealing with here. So he starts out this way, Rabboni. And you see that in the scripture. He doesn't know what to do next. And this man is in the highest category of leaders among the Jews. This man does not go around being speechless. So you know something happened. When he looked at Jesus, he saw something he did not expect. Here's somebody very quiet and very self-secured, humble, but had the bearing of a king. And so we get the setting, and here he is. And before he can say anything more, he can't think of anything to say. Jesus looks at him and says, "You need to be born again." That fast. That's the first thing out of Jesus' mouth. You need to be born again. And now this person is really flustered because what he just heard, and he did not hear what most people think, that he heard something stupid come out of Jesus' mouth, so he's going to say something stupid back. That is not what's happening here. This is a brilliant man. And Jesus just told him, and he thought about it for just a moment, and he knew exactly what Jesus said. Jesus said, "You know, your perceptions, all of them, are no good. Your education is worthless. Your habits are all in the wrong direction. And your religion is no good." The man heard that. Jesus said, "What you're doing is worthless." And so he didn't know what to do except ask a question. And he asked the right one. He picked up what Jesus was doing, so he said, "Well, I better follow along with his imagery. How can a man go back and get born again?" See? It was a very good question. What his answer said was, "How do I give up my perceptions? How do I get past my education? How can I ever understand my religion's no good?" You're telling me I can't go to heaven based on anything I know? Yeah, the man, that's what he meant. Highly intelligent. Very perceptive as to what Jesus was doing. See? But he really was flabbergasted to think that he can't go to heaven based on anything he knows and experiences. He's not good enough. He had never thought that. So now we're in the middle of this now. And he's not quite sure what to do. He came, I'm sure, to get some good Sabbath school material. He's a teacher. Okay? He thought he was going to learn some things from Jesus and put him on another track. But instead, Jesus isn't talking about theology. He's talking to him and saying, "You can't go to heaven the way you're headed." And so now the man is in a place he's never been in his life. And he's asking questions, and Jesus sees how flabbergasted he is, and then he asks the question. You're the teacher, and you don't know these things about salvation? I'm going to stop just there because something just flashed my mind. There's a very famous minister. I'm not going to tell you who he was. He was a minister for 13 years before he was converted to Christ, and he says so in his writings. After he was converted to Christ, he was called to the prison to talk to a man who's going to die the next day. So he went to the prison, and he was talking to the man, and he realized this man's going to die tomorrow. What do I say to him? He said, I could give him the 2,300 days. I could give him a tremendous study on the Sabbath. I could talk about the state of the dead. I could talk about, but what do you say to a man that's going to die tomorrow? And the man looked at him. He said, help me. And that minister, for the first time in his life, realized those 28 doctrines are not what the man was asking for. And he said, I didn't know what to do for him. A Seventh-day Adventist minister. He went home and he prayed about it. He said, Lord, what's wrong? How come I can't give him what he needs? And the Lord pulled the minister out of there because this man was dying. And he showed the minister, you know, you need to present Christ to him. He doesn't need all this other stuff first. He needs to know that his life has been taken care of in Jesus Christ. That he can go to that execution and it's all right. And so the minister went back and he had a hard time with it, but he did it. he tried to lead the man to understand that he was free if he would receive the gift. Well, this is what Nicodemus didn't know. And that's why Jesus, by his Spirit, had drawn the man to come to him. That man didn't know that. He was there because Jesus pulled him. And so here they are. And so Jesus, looking at him, says, Moses. Oh, he woke up. Moses, I know Moses. I know about Moses. So he says, now we're on good ground. He said, Moses, when they were out there, the snake started to bite them. They were dying. And he says, yeah, I know the story. I know that one. He said, and the pole with the snake. Look and live. Nicodemus, do you know that? And Nicodemus said, yeah, I know about Moses. I know about the snake. I know about all of that stuff. He says, Nicodemus, you remember the story because you're going to see it. You're going to know the experience. If I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. And Nicodemus got confused again. He said, wait a minute. You didn't say the Jewish religion. You didn't say theology. You didn't even say what I believe. You said Jesus was the issue. And Nicodemus needed to learn that. Jesus. Now I want to ask you, what does a snake represent in the Bible? Yeah, Revelation 12:9, snake, serpent, Satan, the devil. We see him there in Genesis. He's the snake. Throughout the scripture, that's what he is. He's a snake. He's a serpent. The devil. So when Nicodemus saw the snake on the cross, what did he think about? The devil. And Jesus just said, if I be lifted up. And that just threw Nicodemus. Wait a minute. What are you telling me? Well, Jesus was telling him that there has to be a dead snake on that stick or you don't get saved. So Jesus came from glory. Yeah. God, with everything God means. And he laid it aside so he could become a snake. You see, the Bible says he became a man, but we don't know what that means. Only by taking our sin, all of us, and that means every human, that doesn't mean just Christians, all humans for all time, and taking all of their sin and making it his, that would make him the biggest sinner in the universe. And he was telling Nicodemus, when you understand what it is I came to do, and that I am your only hope, no other hope, nothing you do or think about, but the fact that I did that and took away from you your sin and all your perceptions and all your education, and they became mine. That's the only way you will ever be fit to go to heaven. By receiving what I give you then. Now, I told that in a more elaborate form to a fifth generation couple of Adventists in Texas. Fifth generation, that puts them real close to Ellen White. And they had never heard that's what the Bible is teaching, and they were converted to Christ that day. Oh, they were. They did everything Adventists do. Everything. But they didn't know what Christ meant until they figured out what that snake was. So you could be an Adventist a long time and still not know some of these things. Okay? We've got to let the Spirit teach us. We know the words. Now we need to know what they mean. So Jesus came, and he was the snake on that pole. And he says, if you look and you know that's the only solution, the fact that I became that snake, you will live. Okay? You try to remember what Nicodemus went through the rest of his life then, because he was learning about that the rest of the time. And he saw it. Jesus is my only hope. Yes, I will try to obey God, but I must know that my efforts are meaningless until I have received the gift of Jesus. When I have the gift of Jesus, then my efforts will mean something to God. I still won't do very good by myself, but Jesus is going to educate me, and he's going to keep lifting me, and he's going to bring me to the place where everything I do is acceptable to the Father in him. Everything. Someday we'll talk about that, what everything means. All right. What about the goats? How come there's two of them? You know, the churches all around here, including the one over there, thinks that those two goats represent Jesus. But to my simple mind, I don't understand why it takes two to represent one. One goat's enough if you're going to have a goat for Jesus. But there's two goats. Well, you know why there's two goats, but we want to look at this. How come it isn't two sheep? Yeah. How come it isn't two anythings? How come it's goats? Why does it have to be goats? Well, you know there's a difference between a sheep and a goat. If we're not on a farm, maybe we don't know the differences. But a sheep, when they passed out the brains, I don't know what happened there. A sheep will follow another sheep right over a cliff. And not think twice about it. Sheep don't seem to care much about survival. They'll just do any weird thing and get themselves killed, get themselves hurt. They'll wander off and absolutely not know how to come back. You know, dogs, you can't lose them. You leave them someplace, you come back, they're at your door again. You see, other animals are not like sheep. Sheep are really something. Now, what's a goat? Well, you know, you can't get rid of a goat either. If that goat wants to be by you, there's nothing you can do to get rid of that goat. You can shut a door and they'll come through. Goats are really something. There's one other real major difference between goats and sheep. A sheep will stand there and watch a wolf eat another sheep and not know he's next. A goat won't stand for that. If he sees somebody messing with another goat, he puts his head down and he lets you know he doesn't like it. A goat is a defender of the herd. And so goats are fighters. Goats don't take guff. Okay. And so the symbol on the Day of Atonement is two goats butting heads. What are they doing that over? Oh. Well, it's over us. One goat is saying, you can't have them, they're mine. And the other goat says, they're not yours, they're mine. See? So it takes two goats. Jesus is one goat, and the other goat is Satan. It's two goats going for the herd. So the fact that it's goats is very important. All right, in Leviticus 16, you study it carefully sometime. I mean, really look at it. There are some major things going on in there. First of all, this only happens once a year. The high priest is going to go into the most holy place. And you know, if you're the high priest, you know that that day you're not going to talk about God. You're not going to believe about God. You're going to see him. He's going to be in the same room where you are. And so guess how you sleep the night before? Yeah, they didn't sleep. One of the reasons they didn't sleep is they didn't want to have a dream. You can't control your dreams. They didn't want to have a dream and then go see God. So they said, no way am I going to go to sleep. Because if you go in there to see God in the wrong condition, you don't walk out. They pull you out. So the high priest knew there was something serious going on that day. And so did the rest of Israel. They knew if you're not right on that day, you're no longer part of Israel. You're cut off. And so after the beginning sacrifices, the priest did something he normally didn't do. He had a bull, a bullock, that he sacrificed for himself and his family. Nobody else involved. He had to be sure he was right so he could do what had to be done that day. So a bullock. Now a bull is more than a sheep and more than a ram and more than a goat. A bull is a big animal, expensive. So after he did that, they brought two goats. Now, what was the difference between the goats? Well, that's later. But what's the difference between the goats when they bring them? No difference. Now remember that. There's no difference between the goats. I pondered that a long time. I said, wait a minute. There's no difference between the two goats? I know one's going to be for the Lord, one's going to be for the saint. But how come there's no difference before then? They're both the same. So I decided I needed to know more about goats. And I found it. And you know where it is? It's in the very next chapter, Leviticus 17. It was that close all the time. It's verse 7. Let's look at that. Okay, Leviticus 17:7, they shall no more offer their sacrifices unto devils. Well, you can't see it in the King James Version, but the word devils right there is the word sahir in the Hebrew. And the word sahir means goats. The word devil and goats is interchangeable. And what threw me after I looked at this was that same word means satire. What is a satire? It's half goat and half man. This is where the Greeks get the same word they have, satire, a goat man. And so this is not just an animal, it's an intelligent animal, and it's a devil. So when those two goats came, it didn't matter which one you picked. They're both the same. Jesus volunteered to go all the way in our salvation, which meant he would have to take the place of a devil. That's beyond humility. That's beyond obedience. And so I began to see what the Bible's trying to tell us about these goats. Satire. A sahir, a devil. So in that verse, you can change it. They shall no more offer their sacrifices unto goats, because it's the same thing. Devils. Well, they have two goats now. One will be for the Lord, and one will be for Azazel. And since it doesn't make any difference which, they'll let God pick which one is going to be used for what. And so they cast lots. Now, people have an interesting idea about casting lots. They think it's like playing dice. You throw the dice, whichever one comes for this one. Well, that's not what the Hebrews did when they cast lots. That's the breastpiece on the high priest. Okay? Now, it was actually twice this long, but it was folded over. Okay? And it was folded in such a way that it made a pocket. Okay? It's now a square pocket. And inside the pocket, two stones, the Urim and the Thummim. Now, I don't know why the translators didn't translate those words. Maybe they couldn't understand what they meant. But one is light and the other is perfection. That's what those two words mean. Lights and perfections. And when God was going to talk to the Israelites, they had to go to the high priest and ask the stones a question. Because the priest represented God, and God would answer through the priest, through those 2 stones. If the answer was yes, this one lit up. If the answer was no, this one lit up. And sometimes little clouds. And so they had to ask questions based on yes or no answers. And so when they asked about which one is for the Lord, yes or no. Is this one for Azazel? Yes or no? And God would pick which goat would do which. So now you know which goat is going to be used for what purpose. But they're still the same. Okay? They're still the same. They both represent the devils. So the Lord's goat is going to be sacrificed, and the Azazel goat will not be sacrificed. God is trying to tell us something we have not portrayed to the world very well, because the world thinks when we talk this way, we're coming out with 2 saviors, 2 atonements. I'll explain that in a minute here. But the Lord wanted to teach there cannot be 2 atonements coming out of these 2 goats, because only one of them is sacrificed. The other one is not. This one is used for blood, and the other one is not. The atonement is over with this one by the time you get to this one, the living one. See? So this one has nothing to do with the salvation of human beings, just this one. So there's a real difference between what the 2 of them accomplish. All right. Now, as I delved into this, the Bible said something, and no one commented on it that I could find. Even Ellen White doesn't say a lot about it. It's so sparse. The one thing that bothered me was that the priest did not confess sin on this goat that's going to be sacrificed. No sin. Now, it's the Lord's goat, but there's no sin confessed on it. It's a sin offering, but no sin on it. Which told me something very interesting. This goat has no personal sin. It's sin laid on it. So all that sin on that goat doesn't belong to that goat. All that sin has already been confessed. It's in the sanctuary. All right? And so there are tremendous things coming out of this that the entire Christian world has missed. They don't know any of this. So they sacrifice the goat, and they go through the sprinkling. And now, this blood, since it does not have sin confessed on it, is what kind of blood? Pure. This blood is different than all the other blood. That's what I finally came to. This blood is not going to defile the sanctuary like all the other blood. It will cleanse. And it's all really starting to make sense. But I have to tell you, if you go looking to see about what happens to this goat, you will not find anybody in our ranks. There might be one who has talked about the fact that there is no sin confessed on this goat. But it's very important. I only picked it up because nobody wrote about it. That's how come nobody's writing about this? And you see the cleansing blood then. It will now go into the most holy place and cleanse the record of sin there. It will come into the holy place and cleanse the record of sin there. And then it will go out into the courtyard to cleanse there. Now, what do those 3 places represent? Well, the tabernacle itself, of course, represents things going on in heaven, so that's all we really need to know. Heaven itself is going to be cleansed from sin, which means heaven has a problem right now. This is one of the reasons the Sunday keeping world can't take this, because they can't visualize how there could be a problem in heaven about sin. Then, in the courtyard, which takes place 1,000 years later, that's cleansed. That's the earth. Okay? So, between the heavenly place and that cleansing, something else happens. The priest comes out after he has cleansed the sanctuary, and he lays both his hands on the goat's head that's standing outside. Yeah, Azazel, Satan. And by the way, the churches do not believe Azazel represents Satan. All right, he puts his hands, both hands, and you'll notice he's transferring sin again. He didn't do it to the goat, first goat, but he's doing it to this one. All of us, where did he get the sin to put on this one? Well, it came from the records in there of God's people. This is very interesting because there are some shifts going on today that I want to make you aware of. He puts his hands on him, and then he sends him away by a fit man, a man who has no problem. And he leads him away, and he's not the goat's not heard from again. Now, there's no sacrifice. You can't say, I saw him die. So death is not a factor with this goat, except that he's never seen again. And that means the sins are never seen again. They're gone. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment, because in the Christian world today, if you ask them, what is God going to do about sin? There is absolutely no answer, because to them it's always going to be around, roasting in a place called hell. They have no idea that sin is something God hates and he's going to get rid of it. They think he's going to have a place for it forever. I don't know how people get over to that kind of a place, but there are millions and millions of them. And they seem to be happy with the idea. Well, I have to draw you a line here about sin in just a moment. So Satan, Azazel, then in the type, he's taken away. And the Jewish people tell us in their writings that they wanted to be sure that goat didn't come wandering back into the camp, so somebody helped him over a cliff. That's not Bible doctrine. It's just what they did to make sure he didn't come back. They knew it was important he doesn't come back. In Nahum, that's what it says. The affliction shall not rise a second time. It's not going to come back. Okay. I don't know how the churches have all missed that scripture, that there's going to be no sin. It's never going to happen again. All right, I want to draw you a little graph here. All right. This doesn't crawl on all fours, but it will do what we need to understand here today. Sin. It had a beginning, and the Bible tells us it's going to have an end. And there's a time factor. Where did it begin? All right. It started with Satan, right? Where should I draw that line? Where should it go? Going to end in exactly the same place. Okay? This is the end of sin. So we see, according to that little graph, that sin began where Satan began it, and it will end when he ends. Now, angels sinned. Satan tempted them to sin. So he is responsible for their sin also. They are personally responsible, but he's responsible for enticing them, for seducing them, for tempting them. So the angels that fell, the same line, same time, it ends. But now get this in your mind, that first Satan sinned, and he is going to end, and that will end sin. Then the angels sinned, but you'll notice their sin is going together. As long as they're sinning, he is participating in their sin. There cannot be sin in the universe that Satan is not responsible for. He brought it. He made it. So any sin that happens after that is his sin also. Okay, it's a very important idea here. Okay, so now we have humans sinning. Why did they sin? Satan is responsible for their fall. He seduced them. So now, every time a human sins, it is also the sin of Satan. So Satan now has the angels' sins, and he has all human sin. They're stacking up on him. He has it all. He is the ultimate responsibility. It's just loading up on him. This becomes difficult now. Some humans are not going to do this all the way to the end. Some humans, Jesus takes their sin. They don't have the problem anymore. Okay, that's enough to work with. I'm going to read you some statements now. In Early Writings 178, this similar statement is in One's Spiritual Gifts, page 61. There's a difference, though, and I want to read you that difference, too. All right, in Early Writings 178, Satan did not then exult as he had done. He had hoped to break up the plan of salvation, but it was laid too deep. And now, by the death of Christ, he knew he himself must finally die, and his kingdom be given to Jesus. He held a council with his angels. He had prevailed nothing against the Son of God, and now they must increase their efforts, and with their power and cunning turn to his followers. They must prevent all whom they could from receiving the salvation purchased for them by Jesus. Now, she didn't say they thought it would be a good idea. She said they must. There's a very real reason why they have to keep people from being saved. By so doing, Satan could still work against the government of God. Also, it would be for his own interest to keep from Jesus has been impossible. For the sins of those who are redeemed by the blood of Christ will at last be rolled back upon the originator of sin, and he must bear their punishment, while those who do not accept salvation will suffer the penalty of their own sins. She says it a different way in Spiritual Gifts. I'm going to read it to you now. For the sins of those who are redeemed by the blood of Christ and overcome, at last will be rolled back upon the originator of sin, the devil, and he will have to bear their sins. That's different than taking punishment. It says he will bear their sins, while those who do not accept salvation through Jesus will bear their own sins. All right, so are we getting this? Satan has a price to pay for his personal sinning. His personal sinning includes all the sins of everybody that sinned because of him. See, that's not your sin added to him. That's his own sin. That's a very important distinction. That your sin is not added to Satan because he caused you to sin. Your sin is the sin of Satan. He has to pay for it because it's his. He caused you to sin. I'll read some more statements to try to clear that up. In Great Controversy 485, as the priest in removing the sins from the sanctuary confessed them upon the head of the scapegoat, so Christ will place all these sins upon Satan, the originator and instigator of sin. All sin. Not just his sins, all sin. There is no sin that he's not a part of. He started it. The scapegoat bearing the sins of Israel was sent away unto a land not inhabited. So Satan, bearing the guilt of all the sins which he has caused God's people to commit, will be for 1,000 years confined to the earth, which will then be desolate, without inhabitant, and he will at last suffer the full penalty of sin in the fires that shall destroy all the wicked. F.C. Gilbert, Practical Lessons, page 264. When all the sins of all God's people shall have been blotted out through the precious blood of the Lord himself, as a lamb without spot, then the Azazel, the antitypical scapegoat, Satan, shall be brought to the heavenly high priest, who will lay the sins of the redeemed upon his head. He will lay what? The sins of the redeemed. Their sins on his head. So in addition now to the fact that their sins are his, because that's what he did, now he receives what their sins, period, on top of all that, because they were redeemed by Christ. Stephen Haskell, when our high priest has finished his work in the heavenly sanctuary, he will place all the sins of the righteous which he has borne thus far upon the head of Satan, the instigator of sin. Satan will then be left on the earth, etc. So Haskell agrees with Ellen White and with F.C. Gilbert. I have some more quotes here. I just want to use the familiar ones. Uriah Smith, looking unto Jesus. The practice of sin may therefore be represented as a partnership business. Satan is the senior partner, the sinner, the junior. The latter, having been seduced into that position, is allowed under certain conditions to leave the company and step out from under the obligation of the firm, upon whom will these responsibilities then fall? Upon the only remaining member of the firm, of course, the instigator of the whole evil business, the senior partner. Okay, that's where it's going to fall. Satan, if the sinner chooses to maintain the partnership in that illegitimate business, he can do so and receive in his own person at last the punishment of his deeds. But it is in his power, if he desires, to change his present relation to that commerce, to unite himself to Christ and leave his former business, and so forth. Okay, let me find where I want to take you. Let's see. Viewing in this light the work of Satan among mankind, it is evident that the matter has been so overruled that in seducing men to sin, he has been playing a game, the effects of which recoil upon his own head. A game which in his own behalf is a most unfortunate and losing one. It would have been far better for him if he had never led men into sin. But having entered upon this work, we see he has a personal motive of the most powerful kind to induce him to hold persons in sin to the last. For then they receive the punishment for their own sins, which he otherwise must suffer. Well, it sounds to me like he's agreeing with Gilbert, and he's saying the same thing. Uriah Smith. Now I am going to read you some statements that didn't come from the pioneers, that you can get in any ABC. And they may surprise you who they are. I won't tell you who this is. I'll just start reading. This is in a chapter called The Scapegoat. The sins that are put on the head of the scapegoat are not the atoned for sins. The white canceled sins, the non-existent sins. They are Satan's share in all of those same sins. Are you hearing the difference? The share for which no atonement was made, and which were not provided for in the Lord's goat. Satan bears his own personal sins and also a share in all the sins for which he is responsible. In this way, all sin is provided for. Christ bears and annuls in his own body all the confessed sins of his people. The unrepentant sinner who does not accept Christ as his sin bearer bears his own sin. Satan bears his own sins, and in addition, the terrific weight of the guilt of all the sins which he has caused others to commit. Well, what did that say? It's not even on the board. It says here that Jesus, when he took our sins, annulled them. The word annuls means they're gone now. Well, what Adventist ever taught that? I never heard of a single Adventist among the pioneers who ever said such a thing. What I hear that the pioneers teaching and what the Bible teaches, what the Spirit of Prophecy teaches, is that when our sins are forgiven, a record is made. Jeremiah 17:1. They aren't annulled. That's what the Sunday keepers teach. That they're blotted out and they're annulled. Now, this man who wrote this is a highly respected individual in the Seventh-day Adventist movement. And I'm sure that he was as honest as they come and more dedicated than most. But he still got trapped into a Sunday-keeping idea. It's M.L. Andreasen. It's in his book, Sanctuary Service. How'd you get over there? Well, I have an idea because I did some research in that area and I found out a lot of interesting things during that time. The Adventist people were feeling down as a people. And they wanted the Sunday keepers to appreciate us. And so we wanted to be as much like them as we could without compromising. But you can't do that without compromising. You're going to do it. And we began to change some of our language. As a matter of fact, Figueroa, the president at that time, said that Walter Martin helped us with the language. Walter Martin, he's the man that wrote the book on the cults. Yeah, he was a young whippersnapper back then. He was only about 22. But that man shook up the Adventist church. And they started talking like Sunday keepers in certain areas. This is one of those areas. Now, I don't wish by telling you this to make you think anything bad about Andreasen. He was a tremendous man. He did a lot of really good work. And he was a tremendous scholar, but I think he fell into a trap here. He's dead. We have to give him room, okay? You don't talk about dead men and say, look how bad they were. You don't do that. But we have to recognize that when he said this, he did not say it like Ellen White did or any of the pioneers. The language is shifted there. And it's not saying the same thing that Adventists are supposed to be saying. C.H. Watson, president. In the work, The Atoning Work of Christ, in the chapter Bearing Iniquity, quote, Satan, I missed a word here, since every sin is his, dies in them all. However, this does not make him the bearer of the sins of either the righteous or the wicked. He bears only his own sins. Well, that isn't what it says in early writings. He bears the sins. William H. Branson, reply to Canright. Now, this is a man defending Adventism. And notice how he defends Adventism against Canright. What part, then, did Satan's goat have in the removal of sin? Just this: Satan is the instigator of all sin. He is primarily responsible for the sins of all men, and the death of Christ does not atone for his share of the responsibility and guilt. Therefore, when our sins have been atoned for by the blood of Christ, Satan must yet answer for his part in those same sins. He has no part in atoning for man's guilt, but he must suffer for his own guilt in leading men into sin. Well, that's some strange language there. There's truth in here in what he's saying, but it's not complete. It doesn't go where it's supposed to go. He did not say that, in fact, the sins of redeemed men go back to Satan. He doesn't say that. He leaves that out. Well, to leave it out leaves out the most essential part of the statement. This next one is a highly respected man, and I think deservedly. He's done some tremendous work and continues to do tremendous work. But it just shows you cannot trust the best of men. You better believe the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy. Amen. This is Leslie Harding. In his chapter, The Two Goats, in his book on the sanctuary, The Shadows of His Sacrifice, I mean, he is the expert. Here's what he says. Why is it that the guilt is put upon Azazel or Satan? The reason may be simply illustrated something like this. This auditorium may grow very warm. I ask one of the ushers to open a window. He takes a pole to push it up. As he's passing, a foot darts out, a mischievous foot, and he is tripped. He plunges the end of the rod through the window, and it is broken. Who broke the window? Why? We all saw that the usher broke the window, of course. But we did not see the foot. Okay? So, with the sinner, we see him sin, but we do not always see the foot that has tripped him. The tempter must be exposed to the universe when all this work is completed. Oh yes, we've all sinned, we must die, but Christ died for us, for everyone. He does not only bear the sins of the righteous, Christ has borne every sin of every man that ever came into the world. The purpose of the ceremony, here we go, with Azazel is to point out that to the universe that Satan is the instigator of all sin. And that's where he leaves it. He doesn't say the sins of God's people are going to be put on him. He leaves it out. And that's happening in our modern books. The key element of the two goats is being left out. So we need to know something here. The two goats are very important. The Day of Atonement is very important. The end of sin is very important. Because we're the only church that teaches this. I shouldn't say church. We're the only people. We're more than a church. There's a remnant inside the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Not all people who call themselves Seventh-day Adventists are Seventh-day Adventists. Okay? We have a problem, just like the Lutherans, the Methodists, the so-called non-denominationals. We have a problem. It's in the book of Revelation. You say I'm rich and increased with goods. Oh, do I know my Bible? Boy, do I know the spirit of prophecy. But you're poor and blind and wretched. And you know what Jesus says? You don't know it. Now, I've thought really hard about that because it really throws me for a loop. Have you ever met a blind person that doesn't know they're blind? Now that's sad. To be blind and not even know it. But that's what God says about the last people on earth that are calling themselves Christians. And I hope you don't think it's just the other churches. We have the problem. And the hard thing about this problem is we can't start looking around to see who has it. You know, if you're blind, you can't see it. That's what gets me about some of these tapes going around. These people, they name people who have the problem, and they don't realize they're worse. We need to do more than read. That's good. We need to read, but we need to do more than read. We need to do more than believe Jesus saved the world. It's not enough. We can know all the theology and be absolutely certain that everything we know is true. It's not enough. That's like Nicodemus. See? Jesus said it's not enough. Your religion is never going to save you. He said, when I'm lifted up, That's what we need. We need to know we have a conversation with Christ for ourselves, and He teaches us. Yeah. Now, these meetings are good because we can share some ideas. But you mustn't believe anything that's said here. You have to wait till God tells you, this is what I want you to know. It's for you because I'm giving it to you. And when we know Jesus has given it to us, no one can take it away. And you know that if He's the one giving it, it's not going to have mistakes. It's not going to have problems. It's not going to have these kinds of things that's happening in these books. You can know, I'm safe in this because Jesus gave it to me. It's too easy to accept ideas that we read or hear about. See? They sound logical, but how are you measuring it? What tools are you using to measure it? You say, well, my brain. Well, what good's your brain? I can tear your brain apart in 5 minutes. I've done it in whole churches. You know, one time in a 500-member church, I walked in there with some cellophane and a lamp, and I drew a picture. I said, this side of the church, you keep your eyes closed while I deal with this side. Okay, this side of the church, what do you see? Don't say anything. Get it in your mind what you see. And what they saw was a little old lady, the face of a little old lady. And so I told them, okay, now you close your eyes, and you open your eyes, and I'm going to draw. So I drew an old man. I said, okay, get it in your head what you see. All right. And I had already made a composite picture with features of the little old man and the little old lady. One picture. So I put that one on. I said, what do you see? A little old man. What do you see? A little old lady. Perception. They saw what their brain told them. Sometimes in my home when I was giving studies there and people were sitting around, I was asking them questions if they knew certain things. And I said, well, while we're doing this, please look at this jar that I'm handing you. And they got to hold it in their hands. And you tell me how many different colors of glass are in this. So I handed it around, and they went around, and we're talking, and they're counting. When we finished, I had the jar again, and I set it up so everybody could see it. I wasn't touching it. I asked them, all right, tell me how many colors. 6. 6. Oh, I saw 7. How many different colors of glass over here? 5? No. How many over here? So after we were all done and everybody said how many, I held it up again. I said, you know, you all had this in your hand. There are no pieces of glass on this. It's all colored paper. Yeah. Little pieces of colored paper glued on there. But they had it in their head. There was going to be glass in there, and that's what they saw. I can prove over and over and over how easy it is to fool the human brain. We can't afford it when it comes to what God's trying to tell us. We can't afford it. You can't afford it coming from Seventh-day Adventists. Yeah. Some of the hardest pills to take are our own people. We have to realize that. Now this group, there's something special going on here. I don't know what it is, but the Lord is doing something. We're here for a reason. We each one are picking up different things, different ways, and the Lord's going to use it. But one of the most important things you can get out of all of this is study for yourself. You know, one of the real marks of humility is that we don't trust ourselves. Don't you ever trust yourself? Well, if I can't trust myself, who else am I going to trust? No, when it comes to salvation, there's only one I can trust. And I have to hear him talk. So learn it. I'm talking to you this way because I just read a sermon. A pastor, another church, not a Seventh Adventist church, and he was telling his people, I don't want to be playing games. He says, I want to know so I can do. He says, the thing I don't see is the power. He's telling the people in his congregation, I don't see the power. I don't see Acts, the 9th chapter, happening today. He says, what's wrong? Well, I want to go over and try to tell him what's wrong. Yeah, because he mentioned something that I didn't expect coming out of him. He said, we have Jesus imparted to us. And I didn't know he really believed that. Imputed, they all say. But when they say imparted, don't you have to believe the same thing Jesus believes when his Spirit's in you? I want to ask him some questions and see where they go. It's very ticklish because when you really believe you're right and you say, I want God to talk to me, when God does, we say, I don't want to hear that. Yeah, I've had that happen too many times. I've heard these people say, oh, I want God to tell me. Well, we mustn't get over there too. We mustn't say, I want God to talk to me, and when he does, later. No, let's receive what God tells us now. I think I received a rebuke yesterday. I'm not sure yet. I have to study it out now and see, what did God tell me through that? Just a couple lines in a book. And I thought, that isn't very clear to me. I want to find out what that said. Because I think I'm going to have to change my mind about something. I'm not sure. I may have to skirt around the edges to see where does it fit and where doesn't it fit. Because I have discovered something else. There's no black and white with God. He does things this way here, and he does this here, and he does it over here, and he'll use the same word all three places, but you have to know that he uses it a different way each time. This takes work. It takes some thinking. It takes a lot of praying, and it takes listening. So let's learn it. By the way, if you have some experiences, don't be afraid to raise your hand and tell us something happened this week that I want to share with the group so that we can all benefit from how the Lord's leading us here. Okay. Were you just stretching, or did you have something right now? Okay, good. Okay.
Well, Jesus Christ is not this small. He's huge. He has a lot of power. He brought me back together with my daughter. Amen. And I want my court, and beyond that, still. Yeah, so what I do about my faith